Bonnie was very generous in only charging a loonie because we have to put a little bit of money into our own coffers. But if you've been fined, at least go out and donate that money to a charitable cause that's close to your heart. You know, whether it's one of our corporate members like United Way, or it is a church, or it's a food bank. There are so many worthy causes out there. The Rotary Foundation, you know, take this time of year to be generous if you can, and to make a happier day for those who don't have. You know, the Kingston Rotary Club, they're the original Rotary Club in Kingston, and they're celebrating their 100th year as well. They had a challenge in December, and the challenge was to go out and to eat at local restaurants. And they wanted to have at least 100 meals for their 100 years of service purchased this time of year. And what a great way to do it, to be able to help out on a local basis and to bring realization that Rotary's been around in Kingston that long. But that was a great way for them to do that. So that's the end of my Rotary Minute. And
well done.
Yes,
well done.
And enjoy this season. And Bonnie, that's enough of that explanation and what you can do with your monies.
Okay, thank you, Doug. At the museum, as I said, one Christmas we decided to center on the celebration using light. One other Christmas we did a Christmas around the world, and that was great fun because we concentrated on the gift giver. And this is a story from Italy, and it wasn't known throughout the entire country of Italy, but in certain regions this was told to the children at Christmas time. And it goes something like this. Legend has it that Befana was approached by the three wise men a few days before the birth of infant Jesus. They asked for directions to where the Son of God was, as they had seen the star in the sky. But she didn't know. But she did provide them with shelter for the night. La Befana was considered the best housekeeper in all of the village, with the most pleasant home. The Magi invited her to join them on the journey to find the baby Jesus. But she said no, she couldn't go because she was too busy with her housework. Later, La Befana had a change of heart, and she tried to find the wise men, but couldn't. She tried to find the baby Jesus, but couldn't. That night, she was not able to find him, so what happened? To this day, La Befana is searching for the little baby. In this popular folklore, La Befana visits all the children of Italy on the eve of the Feast of Epiphany to fill their socks with candy, if they are good, or a lump of coal, or onions, or garlic, if they are bad. Several years ago, when we had our Christmas dinner and our party at the country club, we did a whole celebration on Italy. And that year, Rotary had an outgoing student who was in Italy at the time. And she couldn't come, obviously she was in Italy, she couldn't get home for Christmas that year. So she sent us a video, and we watched the video. And her mother and father came to the dinner, I recall. And our guest speakers for that night were two lovely ladies who belonged to the Italian club in Kingston. And as usual, I don't know why on that Wednesday night there's always a snowstorm. Again, it was a terrible snowstorm that night, and I worried the whole time after our party that these two women got home safely. Does anybody get your loonies out? Just a loonie. Who was the student who was in Italy at that time that we were sponsoring? What was her name? Doug remembered. Lisa Behringer, and it was a pleasure to see her video and to meet her parents. Well, that was a little story about Italy. Now I would like you to tell us a Christmas remembrance. Maybe it's something you remember that you brought from another country. Maybe a cookie that your mother made in Holland, or something else. But I'd like to hear from each of you a Christmas remembered, a special Christmas. Okay, Bill.
Okay. Everybody knows my passion for flying. I shared this one, I think, with Dave Paul recently. One I always remember. Of course, my kids are always important to me, and I always like to highlight Christmas like we all do as parents when they're little. Okay, and of course you get caught up in the Santa story and all of that, but I tend to focus more on the baby Jesus. But with my passion for flying, I had a terrific story to share with my kids one Christmas morning. Okay. And actually it was Christmas Eve, because it was Christmas Eve day when I was on search and rescue standby in Trenton, okay? And of course, every time we get called out on a search and rescue mission, we would call it SAR something. So if Ed got lost somewhere, it would be SAR Coon, okay? It'd be something like that. So we got called out on Christmas Eve, believe it or not. The Rescue Coordination Center called us and said, there is a deer stuck out on the ice, and it looks like it's helpless. And the neighbors are all gathered around, and they're crying for this deer. So we launched the helicopter, we went out, we saw the deer, we found him on a little bit of an ice floe, okay? And so we managed to kind of scare him with the helicopter a little bit, try and get him off the ice floe, onto shore, and everybody was cheering and laughing and enjoying. So guess what we called it? SAR Rudolph. And I got to share that story with my kids. I always remember that one.
I've got one.
We got to save Christmas.
Could have went
Okay,
so
Paul,
wrong.
let's hear yours.
This goes back a while. My brother, the youngest in our family, worked up in Red Lake he worked for a contractor who harvests trees for the paper mills and also planting. And he had about 35 men under him with all the equipment, etc., etc. So at Christmas time, Timmy, he would climb sort of the highest tree in the bush where they were working, and he put a cross up on the top of the highest tree with lights on it with a battery, and he had it all hooked up. And that shone out in that bush out in the middle of nowhere for a number of days prior to Christmas and after Christmas. And Timmy, my brother, died in a drowning accident in 1994. And so his gang carried that tradition on for a number of years after Timmy's death, which was quite, for our family, that was really something. His men would do that for Tim in his memory. So that's a Christmas story that's important to me and my family.
Thank you, Bob.
Very good.
Okay, Dave.
It was at Christmas of 1959, and my father wanted to keep the story of Christmas read alive, so he had these great big skis, the ones you had, the big thick skis, and he went up on the roof of the house and put sleigh marks on the roof of the house, and this is where Santa Claus landed. And he got a hold of some deer hoops, and he put the deer hoops in on the snow around the house as well. But I think the most memorable is my mother was sick, and we didn't have her too many years after that Christmas. And he took us all into the garage, and he bought a baby blue Austin Mini, and there's the biggest red bow in that, So we were sort of really happy that Mother got her car in that, but that's the only Christmas as a child I remember in that. Plus I got an accordion, but I won't bore you with that one.
Okay, Brent.
Okay. Oh, I'm supposed to. Can I? Right here, I guess.
Yep.
So back in 1972, my grandparents passed away in the late 60s, and I had two bachelor uncles, my mom's brothers, and we used to always go to the farmhouse for to visit with them at Christmas. And once the grandparents passed away, well, they'd come our way. and so they didn't have any other family, and so every year they would bring us a really nice gift that would be up and above what we would normally get. So we're always looking forward to that coming back. So this year, we're trying to get the house ready, and I'm kind of in the way, and I'm just a young lad, and so I'm going into my parents' bedroom and keeping an eye on looking out the window to see if I could see them coming down the road. And all of a sudden, I thought I saw their car, and then it disappeared. And then I thought, well, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden, I saw my one uncle on a snowmobile, and my other uncle was driving behind, and they pulled into the yard, and they had bought our family a snowmobile for Christmas. And it was in 1972. If anybody was old enough to remember, it was the year that we had the most snow. We had snow going up to the eaves of the garage, and here comes this brand new snowmobile into our yard. So that's a Christmas I really remember.
Anyone else? Oh, Renee, and then Larry. Okay.
Mine would be more about some consecutive Christmases. I'm the youngest of 4 with 3 older sisters. They would say spoiled, I say terrorized. But that's altogether different. But I was very destructive with my toys. Not necessarily because I wanted to be, just I was younger, I was youngest and 6 years apart in age, and I always felt I needed to compete with them and so on. So in back-to-back years, one year I got the Rock'em Sock'em Robots. I'm playing with those, and many of you guys would remember those. Falls off the table and breaks 2 days after Christmas. And then I got an Evel Knievel guy, and you would pump it down and he'd take off. Well, then it'd go into one of my sister's balls of yarn into the wheel, toast, 3 days in. So continuing in this destructive nature, my sisters had side bets, which I didn't know. The 3 of them had a side bet as to how quickly I would destroy one of my toys every Christmas. Well, the earliest I remember was I got one Christmas toy was a plastic airplane, just a fun little thing, and it had a little wind-up elastic inside, and you'd wind up the propeller. Well, it's minus 15, and you take plastic outside, and what's going to happen? So it goes straight up, straight down, and smashes, and my sister Eileen is jumping around with delight, the one that's just a year older than I am, and she's going, I won. Like, I'm heartbroken, crestfallen, and she's excited because she had said within 6 hours.
Larry.
Thank you. Well, this is the story of the year that Christmas almost didn't come for my brother and I. So the tradition was that on Christmas Eve, my dad, who owned a restaurant in Klein, he would close early on Christmas Eve, and that's when he did his Christmas shopping. So we would all pile in the car, well, actually a half-ton truck with 3 on the tree, if you remember those, and drive to Tweed, Ontario, and that's where he did his Christmas shopping. Well, this particular Christmas Eve, it was snowing and blowing and carrying on. So we left actually early and headed to Tweed. Dad did his shopping. He always gave my brother and I $10 so we could do our Christmas shopping for our parents and for each other. So we did that. We did it in a big hurry because the weather was getting worse and worse and worse. And so we piled back in the car from Tweed and we drove back along Highway 37 and then along Highway 7, and we turned at Calidar to go up, and they used to call it Calidar Hill, and the road was closed. And in fact, it snowed so much, it snowed in kind of freezing rain, and what actually happened was a sander tried to go down Calidar Hill, turned sideways and flipped over. So the road was closed and they couldn't figure out how to get the sander out of the way. So by this time it was maybe 4 or 5 o'clock on Christmas Eve. We were always told if you weren't in bed by midnight on Christmas Eve, Santa would not come. So it was getting later and later, and 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, they had somehow got the sander off to the side of the road, and the road was still very slippery. It was after 11 o'clock at night, and my dad said, I think I can make it up this hill. 2 cars or vehicles had tried before him, and neither one of them made it up the hill. They all went off onto the ditch on the way up the hill.